Hi there. Welcome to NapTime History channel. Tonight we're going to explore what would happen if you suddenly found yourself living as a knight in medieval England. Imagine waking up tomorrow not in your comfortable bed with its memory foam and temperature control, but on a lumpy straw mattress in a drafty stone chamber where the only heating comes from a dying ember in a fireplace across the room. The air smells of smoke, damp stone, and something distinctly unwashed, which, let's be honest, is probably you. You're about to discover that being a knight isn't quite the noble adventure Hollywood promised. And frankly, you probably won't survive your first jousting tournament without accidentally impaling yourself. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these bedtime stories travel. All right, let's begin the story. Your eyes flutter open to near complete darkness. The first thing you notice is the cold, not the gentle chill of an air-conditioned room, but a bone-deep cold that seems to radiate from the very walls around you. You're lying on something that crackles when you move, and as your eyes adjust, you realize it's a straw-filled mattress that's seen better centuries. The room comes into focus slowly. Stone walls with a narrow window letting in pale pre-dawn light, a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron bands, and a chest at the foot of your bed that looks like it could double as a siege weapon. You sit up and immediately regret it. Your head spins, not from a hangover, though medieval ale will certainly give you plenty of those, but from the sheer disorientation of your situation. The rough woolen blanket falls away, revealing that you're wearing what can only be described as a medieval onesie, a long linen shirt that reaches your knees. It's surprisingly soft, which historians still debate about. Some argue medieval linen was actually finer than what we have today, while others insist it was basically wearable sandpaper. A rooster crows somewhere outside, followed by the distant clang of metal on metal. The sounds of a medieval castle coming to life filter through your window. Horses neighing, servants shouting, dogs barking, and what sounds suspiciously like someone emptying a chamber pot from a height that's definitely going to upset whoever's walking below. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed, and your bare feet hit rushes, dried grass, and herbs scattered on the floor to absorb. Well, everything. They release a faint scent of lavender and something less pleasant as you stand. Your room, you realize, is actually quite decent by medieval standards. You're clearly not a great lord. The chamber is too small, too sparse, but you're not sleeping in the great hall with the common soldiers either. A minor knight, perhaps, or a younger son of a minor noble house. There's a small table with a pewter basin and pitcher, a stool, and hooks on the wall holding what appears to be clothing, real clothing, not the linen nightshirt situation you're currently rocking. As you stumble toward the clothes, muscle memory that isn't quite yours kicks in. Your hands know how to work the unfamiliar fastenings, how to layer the garments properly. First comes the braise, essentially medieval underwear that ties at the waist. Then hose, which are individual leg coverings that tie to your braise with points, small laces. If you think putting on pantyhose is difficult, try doing it one leg at a time with strings. Over this goes a tunic of decent wool, dyed a muddy brown that probably looked more impressive before several hundred washes in water that was definitely also used for other things. The castle is stirring properly now. You can hear footsteps in the corridor outside, voices calling to each other in Middle English that your brain somehow interprets, though it sounds like everyone's talking through a mouthful of gravel while slightly drunk. The door to your chamber suddenly bangs open without warning. Privacy, you'll learn, is a thoroughly modern concept, and a young boy of maybe 12 bursts in. "Sir," he gasps, clearly having run here, "Lord William commands your presence in the hall." Before you can respond, he's grabbing items from around the room, helping you into a surcoat, a sleeveless overgarment that displays your heraldic colors. Yours appear to be a rather uninspiring blue and yellow quarterly pattern with what might be lions or possibly very angry house cats. The boy, you realize, is your squire. He chatters continuously as he helps you dress, something about the previous evening's feast, a visiting lord who insulted someone's horse. And did you know that Thomas the groom's wife gave birth to twins, and one of them has 6 fingers, which surely must be a sign from God, though whether good or ill remains to be seen. Medieval people, you're learning, had a lot of opinions about everything. The squire, whose name, you gather from his constant self-reference, is Edmund, leads you from your chamber into a corridor that makes you immediately grateful for modern building codes. The ceiling is low enough that you have to duck under wooden beams. The floor is uneven stone that seems designed to catch unsuspecting toes, and the only light comes from narrow arrow slits that let in just enough illumination to see the person in front of you before you crash into them, which you nearly do, because Edmund stops abruptly at a door. "The garderobe, sir," he announces, gesturing to what you're about to discover is the medieval equivalent of a bathroom. The smell hits you before you even enter, a combination of human waste, lime, and hay that makes your eyes water. The garderobe itself is essentially a stone bench with a hole cut in it, positioned over a shaft that drops directly down to somewhere you don't want to think about. There's no door, just a curtain that doesn't quite reach the floor, and the only toilet paper in sight is a bowl of moss and scraps of rough cloth that previous users have thoughtfully left behind. You handle your business as quickly as possible while Edmund waits outside, humming what might be a hymn or possibly a drinking song. It's hard to tell with medieval music. The moss, for the record, is exactly as comfortable as you'd imagine. Historians still argue whether medieval people actually preferred this to Roman-style public latrines with running water, though the consensus seems to be that medieval folks were just fit to making the best of a bad situation. Next comes washing, and this is where things get interesting. Edmund leads you to a small alcove where a basin of water waits, cold, naturally, because heating water requires the effort and firewood that's apparently reserved for more important tasks. Beside the basin sits a ball of what looks like gray clay, but turns out to be soap made from mutton fat and wood ash. It smells like a barbecue gone wrong, and feels like rubbing wet sand on your skin, but it does, technically, clean. Will you be shaving today, sir? Edmund asks, producing a terrifyingly sharp blade that looks more suited to combat than grooming. Medieval shaving, you quickly learn, is an extreme sport. There's no shaving cream, just more of that delightful mutton fat soap worked into a thin lather. Edmund, thankfully, seems practiced at this, though he chatters the entire time about how Sir Robert, from the next manor, accidentally gave himself a Glasgow smile last month, trying to shave while riding. Your teeth present another challenge. Edmund offers you a twig with a frayed end, a primitive toothbrush, and a small pot of what he calls tooth powder. It's a mixture of salt, herbs, and what tastes suspiciously like chalk. Medieval dental care was actually more advanced than most people think, though advanced is relative when your other option is having the local blacksmith yank out problem teeth with pliers. The Lord's physician recommends rubbing the teeth with sage leaves. Edmund informs you helpfully while you scrub. Though the kitchen wenches swear by charcoal, Margaret, she's the one with the lazy eye, says her grandmother lived to 46 and still had most of her teeth thanks to charcoal. 46, apparently, is considered a remarkable age, which doesn't bode well for your life expectancy. Now comes the question of your hair. Medieval hairstyles for men were surprisingly complex. Not the long, flowing locks of romance novels, but carefully maintained cuts that indicated social status. Yours appears to be the Norman style, short at the back and sides with a longer top, though short is relative when your only cutting implements are shears that could double as sheep clippers. Edmund produces a wooden comb that's missing several teeth and attacks your hair with enthusiasm while explaining that Lord William's barber comes monthly. But last time he was drunk and gave the stable master's son a tonsure by mistake. The morning washing ritual includes several things you wouldn't expect. Edmund insists on checking behind your ears. Apparently, demons like to hide there, and inspecting your fingernails for signs of witchcraft. He also produces a small bundle of herbs that he waves around your head while muttering what sounds like a prayer but might just be as a recipe for stew. Ward off the morning miasmas, he explains, as if that clarifies anything. Your face gets a final splash of cold water mixed with vinegar to close the pores against evil humors, and then Edmund steps back to admire his handiwork. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished metal mirror hanging on the wall, and well, you've looked better. Your face is red from the harsh soap. Your hair is doing things that defy several laws of physics, and you smell like a combination of sheep, vinegar, and burning wood. You look most martial, sir, Edmund declares with pride that seems entirely unwarranted, though he leans in conspiratorially. You might want to visit the necessary again before we go to the hall. Sir Marcus didn't make it through morning prayers yesterday, and Lord William made him clean the guard robes for a week. As you follow Edmund back toward what you're now thinking of as the Hole of Doom, you can't help but notice that everyone you pass seems remarkably unfazed by the general level of medieval hygiene. A servant carrying a bucket of something unspeakable nods cheerfully. A guard who clearly hasn't bathed since the last rainfall salutes, and a cat that's definitely seen better days rubs against your leg. This is your life now. You realize no hot showers, no indoor plumbing, no antibacterial anything. Just you, some mutton fat soap, and the faint hope that you won't catch something that'll be named after you in future medical textbooks. The great hall hits you like a wall of sensory overload. Smoke from the central fire pit mingles with the aromas of fresh bread, stale beer, and approximately 200 people who share your new relationship with bathing. Trestle tables stretch the length of the hall, already crowded with knights, men-at-arms, servants, and what appears to be someone's loose chicken pecking at floor scraps. The noise is incredible, a cacophony of conversation, clattering wooden bowls, and someone attempting to tune a lute with limited success. Edmund guides you to your spot at one of the lower tables, carefully positioned to reflect your exact social standing. You're above the common soldiers, but below the senior knights, in that awkward middle ground where you can see the good food at the high table, but can't quite reach it. The medieval pecking order is ruthlessly maintained. Historians still debate whether the complex seating arrangements were about honor or just making sure everyone knew exactly where they stood in case of sudden violence. Breakfast, you discover, is not the most important meal of the day in medieval England. It's more like a necessary evil between waking up and doing actual work. Your wooden bowl is filled with pottage, a gray porridge that could generously be described as edible and more accurately as hot, wet grain with ambitions. Floating in it are unidentifiable bits that might be vegetables or might be something that fell off the thatched roof overnight. Good morrow, sir. A knight beside you pauses expectantly, and you realize with dawning horror that you don't actually know your own name. Edmund, bless his chatty soul, comes to your rescue. Sir Thomas returns your greeting. Sir Hugh, and the knight, Hugh, grunts and returns to his breakfast, which he's eating with his personal knife. That's right, you remember, forks are still a century away from being fashionable in England. Everyone carries their own knife and spoon, and eating is basically a full contact sport. The bread, when it arrives, is a revelation in density. This isn't the fluffy white bread of your time. It's a brown loaf that could double as a weapon in a pinch. You tear off a chunk, noting the bits of grit from the millstone that make eating it sound like you're chewing gravel. Still, dipped in the pottage, it's almost palatable. Almost. Ale, sir? A serving girl appears with a leather tankard, and you nod gratefully before taking a sip and immediately regretting it. Medieval ale is nothing like modern beer. It's thick, cloudy, and tastes like someone fermented bread in a shoe. But it's safer than water, which even medieval people knew was basically a game of intestinal roulette. The alcohol content is low enough that everyone, including children, drinks it throughout the day without getting particularly drunk, though it does explain why medieval people made some of their more questionable decisions. The high table, where Lord William presides, gets considerably better fare. You can see actual meat up there, probably venison from yesterday's hunt, along with white bread and what might be actual vegetables that haven't been boiled into submission. Lord William himself is a study in medieval power, a man in his 40s, positively ancient, with a beard that could house small wildlife and eyes that seem to be calculating everyone's tax value. Did you hear about the miller? Hugh suddenly becomes talkative, spraying bottage as he speaks. Caught weighing his thumb again, Lord William's having him flogged after morning mass. And weighing his thumb, you learn through context, means the miller was pressing down on the scales when weighing grain, cheating everyone who brought wheat to be ground. It's the kind of petty crime that modern courts would handle with a fine, but medieval justice tends toward the theatrical. Your breakfast is interrupted by a commotion near the doors. A messenger staggers in, mud splattered and exhausted, dropping to one knee before Lord William. The hall goes quiet. Medieval people love drama more than reality TV audiences. The messenger gasps out something about raiders spotted 2 valleys over, and the entire mood shifts. Knights start checking their eating knives, squires run to prepare armor, and someone finally stops trying to tune that lute. Probably Welsh, Hugh mutters, reaching for more ale. They always get bold after harvest time. Remember last year? Took half of Sir Gerald's sheep and his second best horse. Would have taken his best horse too, but it died of colic the week before. Some say it was witchcraft, but between you and me, Gerald feeds his horses like they're prize pigs. You're trying to process the casual way everyone discusses potential violence when Edmund appears at your elbow. You'll need to ready your arms, sir. Lord William will want every knight prepared to ride. The pottage suddenly sits heavy in your stomach. You signed up for medieval hygiene and uncomfortable beds, not actual medieval combat where people hit each other with very real, very sharp objects. But there's no time for existential crisis. The hall erupts into organized chaos as everyone prepares for potential conflict. Your fellow knights are already moving, finishing their ale in quick gulps and wiping their mouths on their sleeves. One knight near you carefully wraps his remaining bread in a cloth. Waste not, want not, especially when your next meal might be delayed by Welsh raiders who didn't get the memo about peaceful coexistence. As you stand to follow Edmund, your wooden spoon clatters to the floor. A mangy dog immediately pounces on it, and you decide it's his now. The great hall is emptying rapidly, everyone moving with the practiced efficiency of people who've done this dance before. You follow the flow, trying not to think about the fact that in a few hours you might be facing actual combat with weapons you barely know how to hold. Don't look so green, sir, Edmund chirps helpfully. The Welsh hardly ever actually attack. Usually they just steal some livestock and disappear back into the hills. Last proper battle was 3 summers ago, and even then, only 2 men died. Well, 3 if you count Roger, but he fell off his horse during the pursuit, so that hardly counts as battle death, does it? The armory smells like oil, rust, and anxiety, mostly yours. Edmund leads you to a corner where your equipment waits, and your first thought is that someone has made a terrible mistake. The chainmail alone looks like it weighs more than a modern teenager, and that's before you add the various plates, padding, and accessories that apparently keep medieval knights from becoming medieval pincushions. Right then, Edmund says with disturbing enthusiasm, let's get you dressed for war. He starts with the arming doublet, a padded jacket that's essentially a medieval bulletproof vest made of layered linen and wool. It's thick enough to stop a cutting blow and absorb some impact, though historians still argue about how effective padding really was versus just making knights feel better about being hit with large pieces of metal. The doublet is already out damp with someone else's sweat, yours from yesterday. Edmund informs you helpfully and smells like a gym sock that's achieved sentience. But it's necessary because wearing chainmail without padding is like wearing a cheese grater as clothing. Trust the medieval knights who learned this the hard way. Next comes the chainmail itself, or mail if you want to sound properly medieval. Edmund holds up the hauberk, a knee-length shirt made of thousands of interlocked iron rings, and you understand why knights needed help dressing. The thing must weigh 30 pounds, and getting into it is like trying to put on a metal sweater while someone pours gravel on your head. Arms up, sir, Edmund commands, and you comply, immediately regretting every life choice that led to this moment. The chainmail slides over your head with a sound like murderous wind chimes, and the weight hits your shoulders like a sack of extremely hostile potatoes. Your knees actually buckle, but Edmund, used to this, steadies you with surprising strength for a 12-year-old. You'll want to bend forward, sir. Let it settle properly, he advises. You do, and the mail redistributes itself across your body. It's still heavy, but now it's evenly heavy, which is somehow worse. Every movement produces a metallic whisper, and you realize why medieval knights didn't do much sneaking. The chainmail coif comes next, a hood of mail that protects your neck and head. Edmund pulls it over your skull, and suddenly you understand why medieval knights are always depicted looking grumpy. The coif is tight, uncomfortable, and makes you feel like your head is being gently crushed by very small hammers. Plus, the links catch your hair in ways that would make a hairbrush weep. Now for the plates, sir. Edmund's enthusiasm hasn't dimmed despite your obvious suffering. He straps metal plates to your shins, greaves, thighs, cuisses, and knees, pull-ins. Each piece has to be attached with leather straps and buckles that Edmund adjusts with practiced efficiency while chattering about how Sir Roland once forgot to properly secure his knee armor and spent an entire battle with one pull-in rotating freely. Like a blessed windmill, your arms get similar treatment, vambraces for the forearms, couters for the elbows, and pauldrons for the shoulders. The pauldrons are particularly awkward, limiting your arm movement to somewhere between robot and scarecrow in a windstorm. Edmund assures you this is normal and you'll get used to it, which seems optimistic given that you can barely reach your own face. The gauntlets are a special kind of torture. These aren't the articulated masterpieces of later medieval periods. They're basically metal mittens with fingers that sort of bend if you really commit to it. Edmund helps you into them, and you immediately lose about 90% of your manual dexterity. Picking up anything smaller than a sword is now a game of chance. Your sword, sir. Edmund presents your weapon with ceremony. It's a standard arming sword, about 3 feet long with a simple crossguard. The weight is surprising, not as heavy as movies suggest, but hefty enough that your wrist immediately starts complaining. The grip is wrapped in leather that's been worn smooth by previous hands, and you wonder how many men have held this sword and whether any of them survived to retirement. Your shield is what's called a heater shield, shaped like the bottom of a clothes iron and painted with your dubious lion, angry cat heraldry. It's lighter than you expected, made of layered wood covered with canvas and rawhide. Edmund shows you how to hold it properly, though properly still feels like awkwardly when you're wearing metal mittens. Now, the helm, sir. This is what you've been dreading. The great helm is a bucket with ideas above its station, a flat-topped cylinder of metal with narrow eye slits and breathing holes that seem designed by someone who never needed to actually breathe. Edmund lowers it onto your head, and suddenly the world shrinks to two narrow slots of vision and the sound of your own panicked breathing echoing in metal. How's the fit, sir? Edmund's voice is muffled, like he's speaking from another room. You try to respond and discover that speaking in a helm is like talking into a tin can. Everything echoes, and your own voice sounds alien. The breathing holes aren't quite aligned with your mouth, so every breath requires effort. No wonder medieval knights kept their helms off until absolutely necessary. You take a step and nearly fall over. The armor has shifted your center of gravity, and walking now requires deliberate thought. Your field of vision is basically whatever's directly in front of you. Peripheral vision is a forgotten dream, and turning your head requires rotating your entire torso. You're starting to understand why medieval battles moved at the pace of aggressive walking rather than heroic charging. Looking most martial, sir. Edmund steps back to admire his handiwork. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished breastplate and barely recognize the figure looking back. You look like every medieval knight illustration come to life, which would be more impressive if you didn't feel like a turtle that's been flipped onto its back and given a sword. Around you, other knights are going through similar transformations. The armory rings with the sound of metal on metal, creative cursing in Middle English, and the occasional crash as someone discovers that bending over in full plate requires planning. One knight near you is having his squire literally hammer a dented pauldron back into shape while he's wearing it, which seems counterproductive, but apparently this is normal. Right then, Edmund says, loading you down with a few more accessories, a dagger for your belt, a leather purse that jingles with what sounds like 3 coins, and a eating knife, because even in armor you might need to attack a tough piece of meat. Let's get you to the courtyard. Try not to fall down any stairs, sir. Sir Marcus did that last month and sounded like a church bell rolling down a hill. The courtyard assault on your senses is immediate. Horses neighing, servants scurrying, and the bailiff shouting at someone about grain taxes. But Lord William isn't leading you to battle after all. The Welsh raiders, it turns out, were actually just a merchant caravan with really unfortunate timing and a penchant for traveling at night. Instead, you're about to discover the thrilling world of medieval estate management, which is somehow more terrifying than combat. Sir Thomas, a thin man with the anxious energy of an overtaxed accountant, rushes toward you. This is Godwin, your steward, and he's clutching a roll of parchment like it contains nuclear launch codes. Thank the saints you're here. The villagers are in uproar about the millwrights. The harvest tallies don't match, and someone's pig has definitely been eating the Lord's acorns without paying pannage. You're still in full armor, which makes this conversation surreal. Here you are, dressed for war, about to mediate a dispute about unauthorized pig feeding. Edmund starts removing your helm, while Godwin launches into a detailed explanation of medieval agricultural law that would bore a modern lawyer to tears. Apparently, everything in medieval England has a fee attached. Want to graze your animals? Pay. Want to gather firewood? Pay. Want your pig to eat acorns that fell on the ground? Believe it or not, pay. The helmet comes off and you can breathe again, though the air is thick with the scent of horse manure and unwashed peasant. Godwin is still talking, something about customary rights versus new impositions, and you realize with dawning horror that as a knight, you're not just a warrior, you're middle management in the world's most violent corporation. The villagers await in the hall, Godwin says, wringing his hands. They're vocal, and Edmund helps you out of the heavier armor pieces, leaving you in chainmail and looking slightly less like you're about to storm a castle. You follow Godwin to a smaller hall where approximately 30 villagers are indeed being vocal. The noise dies as you enter, replaced by the kind of sullen silence that suggests everyone's saving their complaints for the perfect moment. You take your seat on a raised platform, not quite a throne, but enough elevation to remind everyone who charges the taxes around here. The first case involves two farmers arguing over a boundary stone. John claims William, different William, medieval England, had like 5 names total, moved it 3 feet onto his land. William claims the stone has been there since his grandfather's time, and John's just bitter about his cow dying. "My lord," John starts, and you notice he's missing several teeth, which doesn't help his pronunciation. "That stone were by the old oak when I were a boy." He launches into a genealogical history that somehow involves someone's cousin's wife's brother, who apparently saw the original stone placement during the reign of the previous king. Medieval people, you're learning, have memories like elephants when property is involved. William, the farmer, not the lord, counters with his own family history, including someone who might have been at Hastings, on the winning side, my lord, and definitely saw the stone in its current position during a particularly memorable harvest when the ale was strong and someone's daughter did something scandalous with a traveling merchant. This goes on for 20 minutes. Historians still debate whether medieval legal proceedings were deliberately slow or if people just really liked public speaking. You're starting to suspect it's both. Finally, you make a decision that would make Solomon proud. They'll split the difference and put the stone in the middle. Both men grumble but accept it, probably because the alternative is trial by combat, and John looks like a stiff breeze would knock him over. Next up, the pig situation. A red-faced man named Edgar is accused of letting his prize sow feast on Lord William's acorns without paying pannage, essentially a license fee for porcine foraging. The accusation comes from Reeve Robert, a man who takes his job of enforcing feudal obligations with the enthusiasm of a parking attendant who's just discovered a car 2 minutes over the meter limit. 6 days, my lord, Robert declares triumphantly. 6 days that demon sow has been gorging herself on his lordship's acorns. That's 3 pence in pannage fees, plus penalties. Edgar's defense is creative. The pig, he claims, is actually on a religious pilgrimage. She's been blessed by the priest, my lord, walking to the shrine of Saint Whoever Protects Pigs. She is. The fact that this pilgrimage route happens to pass through the best acorn grounds is, he insists, purely coincidental. You're trying to keep a straight face while adjudicating whether a pig can claim religious exemption from acorn taxes when a commotion erupts at the back. 2 women are physically restraining a third from attacking someone with what appears to be a butter churn. The issue, Godwin whispers helpfully, involves illegal cheese production. The cheese dispute is a masterpiece of medieval bureaucracy. Marjorie has been making cheese without using the Lord's dairy, a significant breach of monopoly rights. Her defense? The Lord's dairy is run by Alice, who is definitely watering down the milk, and also possibly a witch, because her butter never goes rancid. Alice counters that Marjorie's cheese gave half the village food poisoning last Easter, and her cow is suspiciously productive for an animal that's allegedly 15 years old. She feeds it devil's herbs. Alice shrieks, pointing an accusing finger. You wouldn't know good cheese if it walked up and introduced itself, Marjorie retorts. This is your life now, not gallant quests or noble deeds, but mediating disputes between neighbors who've been nursing grudges since the Norman conquest. You fine Marjorie 2 chickens for illegal cheese production, but allow her to continue if she pays the proper dairy fees. Alice looks victorious until you also fine her 1 chicken for watering the milk. Everyone grumbles, which in medieval justice means you probably got it right. The morning wears on. There's a case about stolen chickens. The thief claims they followed him home. Unauthorized bread baking, using the Lord's oven without permission, and someone's son who definitely didn't poach that deer found hanging in his cottage. It wandered in and died of natural causes, my lord. The sun reaches its zenith as you finally escape the judicial marathon, only to face your next medieval challenge, the midday meal. The great hall has been transformed since breakfast. The trestle tables are now covered with slightly less dubious cloths, and the smell of roasting meat actually overcomes the general funk of medieval life. This is dinner, the main meal of the day, and everyone from the highest knight to the lowest stable boy knows exactly where they belong in the grand choreography of feudal dining. Edmund appears at your elbow as you enter, steering you to your designated spot with the skillzil of a medieval maitre d'. 7 from the salt, sir, he whispers. And you remember that the massive salt cellar in the middle of the table is basically a social barrier. Those above the salt are respectable. Those below are trying to be. You're close enough to smell the good food, but far enough to know you're not getting any of it. The high table is already filling with Lord William's inner circle. They get at individual plates, actual metal ones, not the wooden trenchers waiting at your spot, cushioned seats, and the ultimate luxury, wine that hasn't been watered down to homeopathic levels. Lord William himself hasn't arrived yet, because medieval power moves involve making everyone wait while their food gets cold. Mind your manchette, the knight beside you mutters, nodding at the thick slice of day-old bread serving as your plate. This is your trencher, and medieval etiquette demands you don't eat it until the meal's end, if you're still hungry and if it hasn't absorbed something that'll kill you. The bread is already soaking up mysterious juices from the table, developing what could charitably be called character. A horn sounds, because medieval people never did anything quietly, and Lord William enters with the kind of dramatic flair that would make a Broadway director weep. Everyone stands, benches scraping against stone, mail clinking, until his lordship graciously allows everyone to sit by. Sitting. The prayer that follows is in Latin, which means half the room is just mumbling along, hoping God grades on a curve. Then comes the parade of food, and you understand why medieval feasts became legendary. Servants stream in carrying platters that would make a modern health inspector faint. A whole roasted pig with an apple in its mouth. Classic. Various birds that might be chicken or might be swan. It's hard to tell after medieval cooking techniques. And something that Edmund whispers is humble pie, made from deer organs, and definitely below your social station to eat. Thank God. The serving protocol is stricter than military drill. Everything goes to the high table first, where Lord William's official taster checks for poison by the highly scientific method of not dying after eating it. Then the platters work their way down, getting progressively emptier and less appetizing. By the time they reach you, the pig looks like it's been through a Viking raid. Spoon your portion quick, your neighbor advises, demonstrating the medieval art of competitive eating. You grab your personal spoon. Forks are still a century away from being acceptable in polite company, and manage to secure some meat that's probably pork and definitely overcooked. It lands on your trencher with a splat that would be unappetizing if you hadn't spent the morning being genuinely hungry. The vegetables, when they arrive, are a testament to medieval cooking philosophy. Boil everything until it surrenders. Cabbage, turnips, and onions have been reduced to a gray mush that tastes uniformly of salt and defeat. Someone passes a bowl of what might be peas, but could equally be small green pebbles that have given up on life. Good harvest this year, someone comments, spooning the vegetable mixture like it's actually food. Medieval people, you're learning, have drastically different standards. The man across from you is eating his turnip mush with genuine enthusiasm, pausing only to fish out what looks like a small stick, but which everyone politely ignores. The social dynamics are more complex than the food. Conversation follows strict rules. You can talk across the table, but not up or down it without invitation. Topics are limited to acceptable subjects like hunting, very good, the weather, mostly bad, and whether the French are planning something, they always are. Religion and politics are technically off limits, which means everyone discusses them constantly, but veiled in metaphor. Heard the bishop's been blessing more wells than usual, one knight comments innocently, which somehow launches a heated debate about church taxation that everyone pretends is about water quality. Medieval subtext could give modern social media a run for its money. Your eating knife, the all-purpose tool of medieval dining, gets a workout as you try to manage your meal. The meat needs sawing, the bread needs cutting, and everything needs to be balanced on a spoon that wasn't designed for actual use. Eating with your fingers is acceptable, but there are rules: 2 fingers only for meat, 3 for bread, and thumb and forefinger for anything you're sharing, which is most things because medieval dining is communal, whether you like it or not. Pass the salt is apparently a major social interaction. The person nearest the salt cellar has the honor of serving others, but asking someone above your station to pass it is like asking your CEO to fetch you coffee. You wait until someone at your level needs it, then casually mention that you wouldn't mind some salt yourself if it's not too much trouble, and anyway, the meat is perfectly fine without it. But if someone's passing it anyway, wine arrives, watered down to the point where it's basically grape-flavored water with pretensions. Everyone drinks from shared cups, which means you're swapping spit with Sir Hugh, who you're pretty sure hasn't cleaned his teeth since the conquest. The cup makes its way around, everyone taking a sip and trying not to think about communicable diseases that won't be discovered for centuries. Then disaster strikes. Someone at a lower table uses the wrong spoon for the sauce, reaching above his station, literally, to access a condiment meant for his betters. The hall goes quiet. This is the medieval equivalent of drinking from the finger bowl, and everyone waits to see how Lord William will react. His lordship's jaw tightens, the offender goes pale, and you're pretty sure someone's about to lose dining privileges or possibly a hand. But Lord William, in a display of magnificent medieval lordship, simply has the sauce removed entirely. No one gets sauce now. The offender will be socially dead for weeks, and everyone will remember the great sauce incident of this particular Tuesday. Medieval society, where table manners can literally be a matter of life and death. The afternoon sun beats down on the tilting yard as you waddle toward what Edmund cheerfully calls martial exercises, and what looks to you like organized attempted murder. Your chainmail, which seemed heavy this morning, now feels like you're wearing a radiator in July. Other knights are already practicing, and the sound of wooden swords hitting shields creates a rhythm that would be almost musical if it didn't represent your imminent doom. Sir Thomas, the weapons master, a grizzled veteran missing an eye and possibly some marbles, waves you over. This is Sir Godric, who allegedly fought in 3 crusades and lived to tell about it, though historians still debate whether PTSD was just considered normal personality in medieval times. You're late for practice. The Welsh won't wait for you to finish your wine. The training weapons are deceptive: wooden wands, practice swords that look harmless but feel like baseball bats when they connect with your ribs. Godric hands you one, and your arm immediately protests. It's weighted to match a real sword, because medieval training philosophy is basically make practice so miserable that real combat seems pleasant by comparison. Right then, let's see your stance. Godric barks, and you try to remember what your muscle memory knows. Feet shoulder width apart, weight on the balls of your feet, sword at middle guard. Except in armor, this feels like trying to do yoga while wearing a refrigerator. Your center of gravity is all wrong, and the helmet limits your vision to whatever's directly in front of you. Your opponent is Sir Hugh from breakfast, who's apparently been waiting all morning to hit something, and you're convenient. He comes at you with the enthusiasm of someone who considers concussions a hobby. The first blow catches your shield. You barely get it up in time, and the impact travels through your arm like you've been hit by a very angry tree. Footwork, the Godric shouts helpfully as Hugh's next wing catches you in the ribs. The chainmail prevents broken bones, but does nothing for the bruising. You stumble backward, trying to remember that footwork is important when your feet feel like they're encased in concrete. Don't retreat straight back. Circle, make him work. Easier said than done when circling in armor is like asking a shopping cart with a broken wheel to perform ballet. You manage a clumsy sidestep, and your counterstrike actually connects with Hugh's helmet. The wooden sword bounces off with a clang that probably gives him a headache, which seems only fair since your entire left side is questioning its life choices. The bout continues for what feels like hours, but is probably 5 minutes. Medieval combat, you're learning, is less about elegant swordplay and more about hitting the other person until they fall down. There's technique involved. Godric keeps shouting about proper cuts and void the line, but mostly it's controlled brutality with occasional breaks to catch your breath. Better, Godric declares, after Hugh finally knocks you on your back. The ground is hard, you're seeing stars, and getting up in armor requires a physics degree and Edmund's help. But you're thinking too much. Combat is in the body, not the head. Again. The afternoon becomes a blur of pain, sweat, and Godric's increasingly creative insults. You practice sword and shield work until your arms feel like overcooked noodles. Then comes spear training, because apparently just one way to die isn't enough. The spear is actually easier, less finesse required, more pointy end goes in the other person. But formation work means coordinating with other knights who are equally exhausted and cranky. Lock shields, Godric commands, and you discover that a shield wall is basically a rugby scrum with weapons. You're pressed against Sir Roland on one side, and a knight who smells like he's been dead for 3 days on the other. Everyone's pushing, metal scrapes against metal, and someone's definitely stepping on your foot, but you can't tell who, because looking down would mean taking a spear to the face. Then comes the part that everyone's been dreading: wrestling. Medieval knights need to know how to fight if they lose their weapons, which means grappling in armor. This is exactly as awful as it sounds. You're paired with a younger knight who has the enthusiasm of a puppy and the technique of a drunk bear. Within seconds, you're on the ground again, trying to remember if medieval medicine knows how to treat a dislocated shoulder. Use his weight against him, Godric advises, as your opponent sits on your chest. Your armor is pressing into the ground. Breathing is optional, and you're pretty sure something just popped that shouldn't have. Medieval wrestling techniques include helpful moves like grab something and twist, and, if all else fails, bash him with your helmet. You manage to roll him off through sheer desperation and something that might technically be a war crime. The bout ends when you're both too exhausted to continue, lying on the ground like overturned turtles while Godric critiques your technique with the disappointed air of a man who expected better but isn't surprised. But the true horror is yet to come. Horsemanship. Your destrier, a war horse that costs more than most peasants will see in a lifetime, is brought out. His name is Tempest, which seems ominous. He's huge, angry, and looking at you like you personally offended his ancestors. Edmund holds the bridle while you attempt to mount in full armor, a process that requires a mounting block, significant help, and prayers to several saints. Sitting on a horse in armor is like balancing a washing machine on a moving platform. Tempest, sensing weakness, immediately tries to scrape you off on the fence. You hang on desperately while Godric shouts instructions about becoming one with your mount, which seems unlikely given that your mount clearly wants a divorce. Now, the charge, Godric announces, and your soul leaves your body. Charging on horseback sounds romantic until you realize you're carrying a 12-foot lance while wearing a bucket on your head and trying to hit a target the size of a dinner plate. The quintain, a rotating arm with a shield on one end and a sandbag on the other, awaits like a medieval practical joke. Your first attempt misses entirely. Your second hits the edge and the sandbag swings around to clock you in the back of the head, which is exactly what it's designed to do. The third attempt is better. You hit the shield squarely and manage not to drop your lance, which Godric considers a victory. Tempest, unimpressed, tries to bite Edmund. The chapel bells ring for vespers just as you're seriously considering faking your own death to escape another round with the quintain. Every muscle in your body has filed a formal complaint, and you smell like a combination of horse, sweat, and whatever Tempest decided to roll in this morning. But there's no avoiding religious obligations. In medieval England, skipping church is like posting your resignation letter directly to God. Edmund helps peel you out of the worst of your armor, though you keep the chainmail because changing completely would take longer than the service. The chapel is a stone building attached to the main keep, small enough to be cozy and cold enough to store meat. It smells of incense, damp stone, and the particular mustiness that comes from centuries of mumbled prayers soaking into the walls. You file in with the other knights, everyone moving with the careful gait of the thoroughly beaten. The social hierarchy continues even here. Lord William and his family get actual seats near the front. Senior knights stand behind them, and you're somewhere in the middle distance, trying not to lean too obviously against a pillar for support. The common soldiers and servants pack in at the back, though at least one appears to be napping while standing, which is a skill you suddenly envy. The priest, Father Benedict, is approximately 200 years old and speaks Latin with an accent that suggests he learned it from someone who learned it from someone who might have heard a Roman once. His vestments are faded but clean, and he moves through the service with the mechanical precision of someone who's performed this exact ritual several thousand times and could do it in his sleep, which he might be. It's hard to tell. The Latin washes over you in incomprehensible waves. Dominus vobiscum, Father Benedict intones, and then everyone responds with something that sounds like et cum spiritu tuo, but could equally be, I want some turkey too, for all the comprehension involved. Medieval church services are audience participation, whether you speak the language or not, and everyone just mumbles along hoping volume compensates for accuracy. You try to follow the lead of those around you, stand when they stand, kneel when they kneel, cross yourself when they cross themselves. The last one is trickier than expected because there's apparently a right way and a wrong way, and doing it backwards might mean you're secretly a heretic. Edmund, bless him, makes exaggerated gestures from his spot with the other squires, though his helpfulness is undermined by the fact that he keeps getting it wrong too. The sermon begins, and Father Benedict switches to English, though his accent and missing teeth make it only marginally more comprehensible than the Latin. He's discussing the parable of the talents, but somehow it becomes a lecture on why everyone needs to pay their tithes on time and stop letting their pigs root in the churchyard. Medieval sermons, you're learning, are where spirituality meets aggressive fundraising. And lo, Father Benedict's voice rises, warming to his theme, as the unworthy servant buried his talent in the ground, so too do some among us bury their grain instead of bringing God's portion to the church. Several people shift guiltily. Someone's definitely getting a home visit from Father Benedict this week, probably involving guilt and a wheelbarrow for grain collection. The church itself is a study in medieval contradictions. The walls are covered in colorful murals depicting various saints doing improbable things to demonstrate their holiness. Saint Sebastian is getting shot with enough arrows to outfit an army. Saint Catherine is having a philosophical debate while being broken on a wheel. And what might be Saint George is either slaying a dragon or having a disagreement with a very large dog. Medieval art is interpretive. Behind you, someone starts snoring. It's a resonant, confident snore that suggests its owner has found spiritual peace, or at least a comfortable standing position. No one seems bothered by this. Medieval church attendance is mandatory, but consciousness is apparently optional. The snorer is joined by a coughing fit from the left, a crying baby from the back, and what sounds like two servants having a whispered argument about a stolen chicken. Then comes the most terrifying part of any medieval service, the collection. A wooden bowl makes its way through the congregation, and everyone's expected to contribute. The social pressure is intense. Give too little and you're impious. Give too much and you're showing off. You fumble for your purse, trying to remember if you even have money. Edmund's earlier preparation pays off as you find a few small coins. Though you have no idea what they're worth, you drop one in and hope it's appropriate. The prayers continue, a litany of requests that range from the spiritual, protect us from sin, to the oddly specific, make Widow Marjorie's cow stop giving sour milk. Father Benedict works through them all with equal solemnity, though he does pause meaningfully on grant Lord William victory over his enemies and prompt payment of all debts owed, which seems pointed. Communion is an adventure. You shuffle forward with everyone else, trying to remember if there are rules about this. The wine is actually wine, unwatered and strong enough to make your eyes water. The bread is, well, it's bread. That's the kindest thing you can say about it. Father Benedict mumbles something in Latin as he distributes it, and you mumble something back that you hope sounds holy. The service finally winds toward its conclusion, but not before Father Benedict announces the banns. Someone's getting married, and everyone needs to know about it 3 times. Reminds everyone about the upcoming feast day of Saint someone you've never heard of, and delivers a pointed reminder that working on the Sabbath includes that thing where you're technically not working, but you're definitely preparing to work. Gerald, we've discussed this. Ite missa est, Father Benedict concludes, which is your cue to respond, Deo gratias, with perhaps more enthusiasm than is strictly proper. Everyone files out in reverse order of importance, which means you're standing there for another 10 minutes while Lord William has a leisurely chat with Father Benedict about probably increasing tithes. Outside, the evening air is a blessed relief after the close confines of the chapel. Edmund appears with your evening clothes, a simple tunic and hose that feel like silk after a day in armor. Other knights are already heading to the hall for supper, moving with the enthusiasm of men who've survived both combat practice and compulsory Latin. Lovely service, Sir Hugh comments, stretching until his back makes a sound like breaking timber. Father Benedict was in fine form. Did you catch that bit about the talents? Every word. You lie smoothly. Thought so. You had that look of deep spiritual contemplation or constipation, hard to tell in this light. The manor court reconvenes after chapel because apparently medieval justice never sleeps, and neither do you. This time you're in the smaller hall reserved for serious legal matters, which means crimes more significant than pig trespassing, but not quite summon the king's judges level. The afternoon's martial practice has left you sore. The religious service has left you confused, and now you have to pretend to understand medieval law while trying not to fall asleep on your makeshift judicial bench. Godwin the steward is already there, organizing parchments with the frantic energy of someone who's discovered 3 different versions of the tax rolls, and they all say different things. Ah, Sir Thomas. He practically vibrates with administrative anxiety. We have several matters requiring your judgment. The miller, you remember, the thumb weigher, has accepted his flogging, but now there's the matter of the stolen sheep. And the stolen sheep, it turns out, is a complex case involving property rights, customary law, and what might generously be called evidence. The accused is Walter, a man whose main crime seems to be looking shifty and owning a suspiciously well-fed dog. The accuser is Robert the Reeve again, who's apparently appointed himself medieval England's most enthusiastic law enforcer. 3 sheep, my lord, Robert declares, pointing at Walter with the dramatic flair of a prosecutor who's been waiting there all day for this moment. Vanished from the common pasture, and Walter here was seen in the vicinity. I was mushroom hunting, Walter protests, which immediately makes him sound guilty because everyone knows mushroom hunting is medieval code for up to no good. His defense isn't helped by the fact that he's sweating profusely and keeps glancing at the door like he's calculating escape routes. The evidence, when presented, is circumstantial at best. There's wool found near Walter's cottage, shocking in a village where everyone owns sheep. Suspicious tracks in a field where dozens of people walk daily. And the testimony of old Margaret, who swears she saw Walter talking to the sheep the day before they disappeared. Plotting, they were, she insists, which raises questions about Margaret's grasp on reality. You're trying to parse the actual legal framework here. Medieval law is a fascinating mix of ancient custom, Norman regulations, and whatever seemed like a good idea at the time. Historians still debate whether trial by ordeal was actually believed to reveal divine truth, or if everyone just agreed it was a convenient way to resolve disputes. Either way, you're hoping this doesn't escalate to hot iron carrying. Has anyone actually seen Walter with the sheep? You ask, which seems like a reasonable question, but causes an uproar. Apparently, demanding actual evidence is not how things are usually done. The court operates more on reputation, community standing, and whether someone looks guilty, which Walter definitely does. His cousin's wife's brother saw him near the pasture at dawn, someone shouts from the back. That proves nothing, Walter's wife shrieks. My Walter's no thief. It's that Thomas the Younger, what done it. Everyone knows he's been eyeing those sheep. This triggers a chain reaction of accusations. Thomas the Younger blames John the shepherd, who blames the mysterious traveling merchants who passed through last week, who probably blamed someone in the next county. Medieval justice, you're realizing, is basically a game of hot potato where everyone tries to pin crimes on whoever's least popular. The legal procedures are Byzantine. There's the hue and cry, the medieval equivalent of a neighborhood watch with torches. The tithing, groups of 10 men responsible for each other's behavior, which sounds great until your neighbor commits a crime. And compurgation, getting your friends to swear you're innocent, which is basically character witnesses with more religious terror. I demand trial by combat, Walter suddenly announces, which makes everyone go quiet. This is the nuclear option of medieval justice, letting God decide guilt through the medium of two people hitting each other. It's legally valid but socially awkward, especially since Walter is approximately 60 years old and built like a scarecrow that's lost some stuffing. Against whom, you ask, already dreading the answer. Robert the Reeve, Walter declares, which is actually smart, since Robert is even older and has a bad knee from that incident with the bull last summer. The two men eye each other with the resignation of people who've just realized their brilliant legal strategy involves actual physical combat. You're about to suggest a compromise when Godwin leans in with urgent news. My lord, we've received word. The sheep have been found. The relief in the room is palpable. The sheep, it turns out, wandered into the forest and got tangled in some lord's illegal deer trap. They're fine, if a bit annoyed, and no one stole them unless you count whoever set the trap, which opens a whole new legal can of worms, since poaching the king's deer is significantly worse than sheep theft. Case dismissed, you declare, trying to sound authoritative. Walter is innocent of sheep theft, however. You pause for effect, because medieval justice loves drama. There's still the matter of the mushroom hunting in the Lord's forest without permission. Walter's face goes through several interesting color changes. Foraging rights are another complex area of medieval law. Technically, everything in the forest belongs to the Lord, including mushrooms, berries, and suspicious herbs that definitely aren't for brewing questionable potions. But custom allows some gathering, and the lines are blurrier than a medieval manuscript in the rain. 1 penny fine, you decide, which is enough to sting, but not enough to ruin him. And next time, ask permission before hunting mushrooms, or whatever you were actually doing. The court moves on to other cases. There's a dispute over a broken betrothal. She says he promised marriage. He says he was drunk and thought she was someone else. A fight over market stall placement, prime real estate in medieval terms. And someone who's definitely been moving boundary stones, but everyone's too polite to accuse the priest. Each case requires navigating not just the law, but the complex web of relationships, feuds, and favors that make up village life. That boundary stone mover, he's also the only person who knows how to fix the mill wheel. The broken betrothal? Both families supply essential goods to the manor. Every decision has ripple effects you won't see for months. Last case, my lord, Godwin announces with visible relief. It's a simple assault. Two men got drunk and hit each other with sticks until one got a broken nose. In modern times, this would be straightforward. In medieval England, it depends on who hit whom first, whose stick was bigger, whether it happened on holy ground, and if either man's third cousin serves in Lord William's guard. They were both drunk, the injured party admits, holding a cloth to his nose. But he hit me with the bigger stick, only because you took the good stick first, the accused counters. Medieval justice, where the size of your stick matters in legal proceedings. The great hall glows with the warm light of what seems like 1,000 candles, but is actually about 12, plus some very smoky torches that make everyone's eyes water. It's evening entertainment time, that magical hour when medieval people pretend they're having fun, despite the fact that Netflix won't be invented for several centuries. Musicians are setting up in one corner with instruments that look like they were designed by someone who'd heard descriptions of music but never actually experienced it. Tonight we have Bardolph the Bold, Lord William announces, with the enthusiasm of someone who's already 3 cups into the wine. Bardolph, who looks neither bold nor particularly bardic, shuffles forward with a lute that's clearly seen better decades. He's wearing what might charitably be called colorful clothing, though the colors have faded to various shades of was probably red once, and might have been blue in better lighting. And the first song is a ballad about a knight who fought a dragon, won a princess, and lived happily ever after. Standard fare, except Bardolph's version includes 17 verses about the dragon's genealogy and a detailed description of its dietary preferences. Medieval audiences, apparently, like their stories long and their choruses repetitive. By verse 9, half the hall is singing along to a refrain that goes something like, "Hey nonny nonny, the dragon did fly, hey nonny nonny, up in the sky." Poetry it is not. You're seated at your usual spot, close enough to hear but far enough away that when Bardolph's lute string breaks during verse 12 with a twang that sounds like a cat being murdered, you're not hit by the shrapnel. He continues undaunted, which is either professionalism or the fact that he's drunk enough not to notice. Medieval entertainment, you're learning, is largely about commitment rather than quality. Between songs, there's gossip. Medieval people, deprived of social media, have perfected the art of verbal information distribution. The knight next to you leans in conspiratorially. Did you hear about Sir Robert's son? Caught sneaking into the miller's daughter's window, claims he was checking for loose masonry. Everyone within earshot snorts. Medieval euphemisms are about as subtle as a trebuchet. And the bishop, someone else chimes in. They say he's blessing so many wells. He's forgotten which ones he's done twice. Old Martha got her well blessed 3 times last month. Now she charges pilgrims to drink from it. The conversation is interrupted by a jester tumbling into the center of the hall. This is Wat the Witless, which seems harsh until you see his act. He begins with jokes that were probably old when Rome fell. Why did the chicken cross the road? He asks, then answers, to escape the Scots. And everyone laughs, not because it's funny, but because not laughing at the official jester is politically unwise. Watt's physical comedy is better, mainly because it involves him repeatedly falling over, walking into walls, and accidentally setting his hat on fire. It's the medieval equivalent of YouTube fail compilations, except live, and with a higher risk of actual injury. When he produces 3 leather balls and begins to juggle, the hall goes quiet with anticipation. He manages 4 successful catches before one ball beans a serving girl, another lands in someone's soup, and the third disappears entirely, probably into whatever dimension lost socks go to. A riddle, Watt announces, recovering with the desperation of a comedian losing his audience. What has 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? Your mother after too much ale, someone shouts, which gets bigger laughs than any of Watt's actual jokes. Medieval heckling is an art form. The entertainment continues with a miracle play performed by traveling players. These are religious stories, acted out with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. Tonight's performance is Daniel in the Lion's Den, featuring costumes that suggest the designer had never seen either a lion or a den. The lions are clearly 2 men under a moth-eaten blanket, and their roaring sounds more like dyspeptic cows than fearsome predators. The actor playing Daniel delivers his lines with the projection of someone trying to reach the back row of a much larger venue. "Oh Lord," he bellows, "save me from these fearsome beasts." The lions circle him with all the menace of sleepy house cats, occasionally remembering to roar, but mostly just bumping into each other under the blanket. The theological message gets somewhat muddled when one lion's head falls off, revealing a sweating actor who looks like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. He gamely tries to continue being threatening while holding the papier-mâché head in place. But the illusion is thoroughly broken. The audience doesn't care. They cheer when Daniel is saved, boo when the pagans appear, and throw things at Nebuchadnezzar with enthusiasm that suggests some personal grievances being worked out. During the intermission, because even medieval entertainment needs breaks, dice appear. Gambling is technically forbidden by the church and definitely frowned upon by Lord William, which means everyone does it constantly, but badly. The games are simple, highest roll wins, but the accusations of cheating are complex. Someone's always using loaded dice, or blessed dice, or dice made from the bones of saints/criminals/sheep, depending on who's telling the story. You're peer pressured into a few rounds and immediately lose what little money you had left after church. Medieval dice are carved from bone and have a suspiciously non random roll pattern that favors whoever owns them. When you point this out, everyone acts shocked that you'd suggest such a thing while simultaneously pocketing their winnings. The evening's finale is a dance, which in medieval terms means everyone links arms and walks in circles while a musician plays the same tune repeatedly until someone falls over or throws up. The steps are simple: to the left, hop, to the right, but after enough ale, even this becomes challenging. You're dragged into the line by a serving girl who giggles every time you step on her feet, which is constantly. The music gets faster, the circle gets messier, and someone's definitely going to end up in the fire before this is over. Medieval fun, you realize, is mostly about lowering your standards and hoping nothing permanently damaging happens. When the dance finally ends, with a knight crashing into a table and sending trenchers flying, everyone agrees it's been a wonderful evening's entertainment. Splendid gathering, Lord William declares, though he's been steadily drinking since noon and would probably find watching paint dry splendid at this point. Tomorrow we hunt. The hall erupts in cheers that are equal parts enthusiasm and dread. Medieval hunting is like medieval everything else, theoretically fun, but practically life-threatening. As people begin dispersing to their various sleeping quarters, you realize you've survived another day of medieval entertainment without major injury or social disgrace, which counts as a win. Supper arrives with less ceremony than the midday meal, but compensates with its own unique horrors. The great hall, still littered with debris from the entertainment, transforms back into a dining space through the magic of servants who sweep things into corners and hope no one notices. Your stomach, having processed the midday meal into regret, reluctantly prepares for round 2 of medieval cuisine. The evening meal is theoretically lighter than dinner, which means the pottage is thinner and the bread is harder. Your trencher from noon has been fed to the dogs. Even they looked skeptical, and a fresh slice of yesterday's bread takes its place. It's already absorbing moisture from the table, developing a texture somewhere between sponge and surrender. Edmund appears with your assigned portion, a bowl of something that might generously be called soup, but more accurately resembles water that vegetables have briefly visited. Floating in it are unidentifiable bits that could be meat, could be turnip, or could be something that fell from the thatched roof. Medieval cooking operates on the principle that if you boil something long enough, it becomes edible, if not necessarily food. "Fine fare tonight," announces Sir Hugh, who's either an optimist or has completely lost his sense of taste after years of this. He slurps his soup with genuine enthusiasm, pausing only to fish out what looks like a small twig. Nothing like a good broth after a day's labors. The social dynamics at supper are more relaxed than at dinner, which means people feel free to be more openly horrible to each other. The knight across from you starts a heated debate about whether the Welsh are planning to steal more sheep or have moved on to cattle. This somehow evolves into an argument about the French. Everything eventually becomes about the French, and then devolves into a comparison of whose uncle fought in which battle with more distinction. "My uncle was at Crécy," one knight boasts, conveniently forgetting that was nearly a century ago, and his uncle would need to be immortal. Mine held the bridge at somewhere important sounding for 3 hours. Another counters, with one arm, while on fire. Medieval one-upmanship is an art form that makes modern social media look subtle. By the time they're done, everyone's uncle was apparently a superhuman warrior who single-handedly conquered most of Europe while juggling and composing poetry. The meat course arrives, and you use the term meat loosely. It's definitely protein of some kind, cooked until any identifying features have surrendered to entropy. It might be pork, could be mutton, possibly beef if you're very optimistic. The sauce is thick enough to mortar castle walls and tastes like someone described flavor to the cook and they misunderstood the assignment. Pass the salt, you request, hoping to make the meat taste like something other than medieval defeat. The salt, when it arrives, is gray and damp, with bits in it that are definitely not salt. But it's better than nothing, which is a phrase that could be medieval England's motto. Table manners at supper are even more complex than at dinner because everyone's tired and therefore more likely to commit social sins. The man next to you reaches across 3 people for the bread, violating at least 2 rules of precedence and 1 law of physics. Someone else drinks from the communal cup out of turn, causing a minor diplomatic incident that requires careful negotiation to resolve. Did you hear about the merchant from London? The gossip begins again, because medieval people have the attention span of goldfish when it comes to other people's misfortunes. Claimed he had silk from the Orient, turned out to be wool with delusions of grandeur. Lord William made him eat a yard of it. This triggers a round of merchant stories, each more improbable than the last. Apparently, every merchant is either trying to sell fake relics, this is definitely St. Peter's toenail, watered wine, it's a miracle how it multiplies, or suspiciously acquired goods. These jewels, found them on a corpse that was already dead when I got there. Your attempts to eat are interrupted by a minor food fight at the lower tables. It starts with someone flicking pottage and escalates to full bread throwing before Lord William's stern look reduces it to guilty silence. Medieval discipline, where a raised eyebrow from your social superior is more effective than modern law enforcement. The conversation turns to tomorrow's hunt, and then everyone has opinions. The best dogs, the ideal weather, the proper way to track a hart, whether the forest is haunted by the ghost of that poacher who died mysteriously last winter. Someone insists they saw a white hart last week, which launches a theological debate about whether albino deer are divine signs or just regular deer with skin conditions. I'll wager 3 pennies we catch nothing but rabbits. Sir Roland declares, starting the medieval equivalent of a betting pool. Within minutes, everyone's wagering on everything from what they'll catch to who'll fall off their horse first. You wisely stay out of it, having already lost your money to those definitely not rigged dice. The meal winds down with cheese that could double as a weapon and ale that's somehow gotten worse since morning. The cheese is hard enough to require your eating knife and significant sawing. It tastes like concentrated farm with notes of basement and regret. But it's protein, probably. And at this point, you're just grateful for anything that isn't boiled into submission. Excellent supper, Lord William declares, though he's been eating from the high table where the food is actually recognizable. He stands, which is everyone's cue to stand as well, benches scraping and mail clinking in a chorus of metal and wood. Dawn brings the hunt. Rest well. As you file out of the hall, stomach full of what you're generously calling food, you notice servants already preparing for the morning. They're checking weapons, preparing provisions, and placing bets on which night will require medical attention first. Medieval efficiency, planning for disasters before they happen. Edmund appears to guide you back to your chamber, chattering about tomorrow's hunt with the enthusiasm of someone who won't be facing wild boars personally. They say there's a magnificent stag in the western forest, he babbles. 12 points, though Sir Marcus says he saw one with 14 points. But Sir Marcus also claims he once saw a mermaid in the mill pond. So, the walk back to your chamber is a careful navigation of dark corridors, uneven floors, and servants carrying things that shouldn't be carried in the dark. You dodge a man with a bucket of something unspeakable, step over a dog that might be sleeping or dead, and finally reach your door. "Shall I help you prepare for bed, sir?" Edmund asks, and you realize with dawning horror that going to bed is another whole process. Medieval life, where even sleep requires assistance and probably a prayer against demons. The night watch begins as you're finally settling into something approaching comfort on your straw mattress. Just as your eyes close, a horn blast splits the air because medieval castles operate on the principle that if anyone has to be awake, everyone should suffer. You're jolted upright, automatically reaching for a sword that isn't there, while Edmund crashes through your door with all the subtlety of a siege engine. "Your watch, oh, sir," he announces breathlessly. "Third hour past Compline." Medieval timekeeping, you're learning, is more art than science, based on church services and the position of celestial bodies that no one can see through the perpetual English cloud cover. You stumble back into clothes that are still damp with sweat from the day's exertions. The chainmail goes back on because apparently comfort is a modern invention, and you strap on your sword with hands that would rather be doing literally anything else. Night watch duty, where you patrol castle walls in the dark, cold, and increasing certainty that this is how you die. The battlements are exactly as welcoming as you'd expect stone walkways to be at midnight in medieval England. The wind cuts through your armor like it's made of wishful thinking, and the narrow walkway is slick with moisture that could be dew, could be rain, or could be something worse from the guardrobe outlets above. Your torch provides just enough light to see where you're about to trip, but not enough to prevent it. "Quiet night," observes Sir Marcus, whom you're relieving. He looks suspiciously cheerful for someone who's been standing in the cold for 3 hours. "Though I swear I heard something in the forest, probably wolves, or Vikings, or Viking wolves. Hard to tell in this light." Sipple. The handover is brief. He points out which sections of wall are particularly crumbly, which shadows usually contain bats, mostly harmless, and which guard positions have the best wind protection, none of them. Then he's gone, practically skipping toward warmth and bed, leaving you alone with your torch, your sword, and the growing conviction that every sound is definitely an invading army. Your patrol route takes you along the eastern wall, past the gatehouse where two guards are definitely not sleeping, standing up, around to the tower where someone has thoughtfully placed a brazier that provides heat to approximately nowhere. The darkness beyond the walls is complete. No street lights, no house lights, just an ocean of black that could hide anything from a lost sheep to the entire French Navy. Walking the walls in armor at night is an exercise in controlled terror. The walkway is narrow enough that a strong sneeze could send you over the edge. The crenellations are spaced perfectly to catch your sword belt, and in every shadow could hide an assassin, or, worse, a superior officer checking if you're actually patrolling. You develop a shuffling gait that minimizes the chance of catching your foot on uneven stones while maximizing the noise to warn any lurking Vikings that you're definitely awake and totally prepared for combat. The sounds of medieval night are unsettling. Owls hoot with unnecessary drama. Things rustle in ways that suggest they have too many legs. And somewhere in the distance, wolves howl because apparently this experience wasn't atmospheric enough. Every few minutes, something goes thump in the darkness, and you have to decide if it's worth investigating or if ignorance is less likely to result in death. Who goes there? You challenge a shadow that turns out to be a very confused goat that somehow climbed onto the walls. It bleats at you with the disdain of an animal that knows you're not a real threat, then wanders off to eat something expensive. Medieval security, where the biggest danger is often livestock with poor boundaries. Halfway through your watch, you meet Sir Godwin coming from the opposite direction. He's been patrolling the western wall and looks like he's seen things. Thought I spotted movement by the tree line, he reports, hand on his sword. Turned out to be Brother Francis relieving himself. Nearly shot him with a crossbow. Would have been hard to explain to the abbot. You compare notes on suspicious sounds, many, actual threats, none, and the likelihood of surviving until dawn, decreasing. The conversation is punctuated by both of you periodically shouting, "All's well," into the darkness, which is medieval for, "I'm still alive and definitely doing my job." The real enemy, you discover, isn't Vikings or wolves, but boredom. After the initial terror wears off, night watch becomes an exercise in staying awake while doing nothing in the cold. You develop elaborate mental games. Counting stones in the wall, you lose track at 347. Composing terrible poetry about cheese, and calculating how many modern conveniences you'd trade for 1 cup of actual coffee. Your torch burns low, and you light a fresh one from a brazier, nearly setting your cloak on fire in the process. The new torch immediately attracts every moth in a 3-mile radius, and you spend several minutes in combat with insects that seem personally offended by your light source. One flies directly into your face with the determination of a tiny, fuzzy missile. "Vikings?" another guard calls out, seeing your wild torch waving. "Moths," you reply, dignity thoroughly abandoned. "Ah, lost 2 men to moths last summer. Savage beasts." Medieval humor, where everything is potentially fatal and therefore hilarious. The watch continues. You check the gates, locked, the murder holes, appropriately murderous, and the various defensive positions, defended by spiders who've built elaborate webs that you walk face first into. Each circuit takes about 20 minutes if you're thorough, 15 if you're cold, and 10 if you think you heard Vikings. Around what must be the fourth hour, your relief arrives in the form of Sir Edmund the Younger, not your Squire Edmund, because medieval naming conventions are designed to confuse. He looks fresh, alert, and thoroughly hateable. You brief him on the night's events: one goat, several moths, possible Brother Francis sighting, definite absence of Vikings. "Excellent," he says cheerfully. "I do enjoy a quiet watch, time to contemplate the divine and practice my whistling." You leave him to his contemplation and whistling, making your way back through the castle with the careful steps of someone who's been awake for 20 hours and wearing 40 pounds of metal. The corridors are tomb quiet, except for snoring from various chambers and the skittering of what you hope are mice, but are probably rats the size of house cats. Your chamber, when you finally reach it, looks like paradise. Edmund has left a candle burning and even attempted to fluff your straw mattress, though fluffing straw is like trying to make gravel comfortable. The thought counts more than the result. You collapse onto the bed, still partially dressed, because full armor removal would require energy you don't possess. As you drift off, you hear the watch calling, "All's well," in the distance, and for once, it actually seems true. No Vikings, no wolves, no invasions, just another night in medieval England where the greatest danger was boredom and the constant possibility of falling off a wall in the dark. Getting ready for bed in medieval England is less sweet dreams and more survive until dawn. Edmund returns to help with the complex ritual of de-armoring, which involves more buckles than seems necessary, and several pieces that have apparently fused to your body through a combination of sweat and determination. Each piece comes off with a metallic protest, revealing clothing underneath that's achieved a state of dampness science hasn't yet classified. "Right then, sir," Edmund chirps with the energy of someone who hasn't spent the night fighting moths on battlements. "Let's get you properly settled." He produces your nightshirt, which is somehow damper than the clothes you're removing. The logic escapes you until you realize the chamber's walls are literally weeping moisture. Medieval insulation is essentially non-existent, and your room has all the waterproofing of a colander. The washing ritual begins again, though washing is generous for what amounts to splashing cold water on parts of yourself while shivering. The basin has developed a thin layer of ice since morning, which Edmund breaks with disturbing enthusiasm. "Keeps you alert, sir. Father Benedict says cold water drives out the devil's heat." You're pretty sure the only thing it's driving out is your will to live, but you dutifully splash your face while Edmund rattles off the evening's necessary protections. Medieval bedtime is apparently when all the supernatural threats clock in for their shift. There are prayers against night demons, succubi, which Edmund explains with a blush that suggests he's not entirely clear on the concept, and something called mare riding, which sounds kinky, but is actually about evil spirits giving you nightmares. "Now for the salt, sir," Edmund announces, producing a leather pouch. He proceeds to sprinkle salt in a circle around your bed while muttering what might be Latin or might be a recipe for pickled herring. "Keeps the witches out," He explains, though last month Sir Roland forgot his circle and woke up with his hair braided, could have been witches, could have been his squire, hard to say. The bed itself requires preparation. Edmund shakes out the straw mattress, disturbing an ecosystem of things that scurry, hop, or fly away. Good news, sir. Only saw 3 fleas. Last week, Sir Marcus counted 17. Course, he can't count past 12, so might have been more. You eye the mattress with deep suspicion. It's been restuffed recently, which means the straw is only moderately decomposed rather than completely mulched. Edmund produces what he calls sleeping herbs, lavender, rosemary, and something that smells suspiciously like the questionable mushrooms from this morning's court case. These get scattered on the mattress, theoretically to promote restful sleep, but more likely to mask the smell of everything else. Your sleeping cap, sir. Edmund presents what looks like a sock that's given up on life. Medieval people, apparently terrified of cold heads and night air, sleep in caps that would make a garden gnome jealous. You put it on, immediately feeling both ridiculous and itchy. The wool is rough enough to sand furniture and seems to have been washed in the same water used for the sheep, but the protective rituals aren't done. Edmund produces a small leather pouch on a cord. Your prayer bundle, sir, wear it around your neck, contains a fragment of Saint whoever's finger bone, some blessed herbs, and a coin with a hole in it. You're pretty sure Saint whoever's finger bone is actually a chicken bone, but pointing this out seems unwise when you're about to sleep in a drafty castle potentially full of actual dangers. Now, the window, Edmund says, approaching the narrow opening with the caution of someone defusing a bomb. Medieval window theory holds that night air carries disease, evil spirits, and French people in roughly that order of concern. He stuffs the window with straw and cloth until no air can possibly circulate, turning your chamber into a tomb with a bed. The final preparations involve checking under the bed for demons, apparently, though you'd think they'd choose somewhere more comfortable. Sprinkling more holy water around, your room is becoming decidedly swampy, and placing your sword within easy reach, but not so close you'll grab the sharp end in a panic. Oh, Edmund suddenly remembers. Your chamber pot, sir, fresh sand in it and everything. He beams like he's presenting the crown jewels rather than a medieval toilet. The pot sits in the corner, a ceramic reminder that midnight bathroom trips involve neither plumbing nor dignity. You climb into bed, the straw crackling ominously beneath you. The rough woolen blanket smells like sheep with ambitions, and the pillow, calling it a pillow is generous, is a sack stuffed with something. Could be feathers, could be more straw, could be the dreams of disappointed medieval peasants. Shall I tell you a bedtime story, sir? Edmund offers. I know a good one about a knight who fought 40 dragons. Just one prayer will do. You manage, already feeling consciousness slip away despite the comfort level of a torture device. Edmund launches into a prayer that covers all bases: protection from demons, safety from fire, divine intervention against bedbugs, and a special request that the roof doesn't choose tonight to leak directly onto your bed. Amen, he finishes. Sleep well, sir. If you need anything in the night, Just shout. I'll be on my pallet outside your door, probably. He extinguishes all but one candle, which will burn through the night, because complete darkness is when the things come out. The door closes with a creak that suggests the hinges are held on by faith and rust, and you're alone with your thoughts and whatever's living in the mattress. You lie there, trying to find a position where straw isn't poking through the fabric into your kidneys. The castle settles around you with sounds that could be normal building noises, or could be the restless dead. Something scurries in the walls. Rats, probably. Though Edmund's stories about demon mice seem more plausible at night. The sounds of medieval night filter through your stuffed window, guards calling the watch, dogs barking at shadows, and what's either an owl or someone being murdered very melodically. Your neighbor's snoring penetrates the stone walls with a resonance that defies physics. Someone somewhere is definitely having a nightmare, unless that's just how they normally sound. You pull the blanket higher, trying to ignore the way it scratches and the fact that something in the mattress just moved. The prayer bundle around your neck provides psychological comfort, even if whoever's finger bone is definitely poultry. Your sword gleams in the candlelight, ready for any nocturnal threats more corporeal than bedbugs. As sleep finally claims you, your last coherent thought is that you've survived another full day in medieval England. Tomorrow brings a hunt, which means new and exciting ways to potentially die. But for now, you're relatively safe in your salty circle, wrapped in your scratchy blanket, wearing your ridiculous cap, and dreaming of a time when beds don't require exorcism. The candle flickers, casting dancing shadows that definitely aren't demons, probably. The guard calls "all's well" in the distance, and you drift off to sleep in medieval England, where even unconsciousness requires protective equipment. The night shatters at what feels like minutes after you've closed your eyes. "Fire! Fire in the stable!" The cry goes up, followed by the clangor of bells that could wake the dead and probably have, given medieval burial practices. You bolt upright, tangled in your blanket like a moth in a spider's web, while Edmund crashes through your door with the subtlety of a battering ram. "Sir, come quickly." He's already throwing your clothes at you with impressive accuracy for someone who's clearly panicked. The horses. You struggle into basic clothing while your brain tries to process the transition from unconscious to crisis mode. The acrid smell of smoke is already seeping through your window, despite Edmund's enthusiastic stuffing job. Outside, the night erupts with shouts, running feet, and what sounds like every animal in the castle expressing opinions about being woken up. The courtyard is chaos, illuminated by orange flames licking from the stable roof. Horses scream with that particular sound that makes human spines evolve new ways to shiver. Men run in every direction, some carrying buckets, some leading terrified horses, and some just running because everyone else is, and panic is contagious. "Form a line," Lord William bellows, magnificent in his nightshirt and fury. "Bucket line from the well. You there, stop gawking and start hauling." Medieval firefighting is essentially organized panic with buckets. You join a human chain stretching from the well to the stable, passing leather buckets that slosh more water on the ground than reaches the fire. The smoke is thick enough to chew, flavored with burning straw, wood, and something that definitely shouldn't be stored near horses. My destrier, Sir Roland wails, as a groom leads out a horse that's more smoke-stained than injured. Medieval priorities: save the horses worth more than villages, then worry about the building. Your own Tempest is let out by a brave stable boy who looks like he's reconsidering his career choices. The horse seems more annoyed than afraid, as if fires are just another human inconvenience he has to tolerate. The bucket brigade settles into a rhythm: grab, pass, splash, repeat. Your neighbor in line is Brother Francis, who's muttering prayers between buckets with the fervor of someone who thinks divine intervention might work better than water. On your other side, a kitchen wench passes buckets while providing commentary. Knew this would happen. That new stable boy from Wessex, always sneaking off to smoke his pipe. I says to Margaret, I says, that boy will burn us all in our beds. The fire, thankfully, is more smoke than substance. Medieval buildings are designed with the expectation of regular fires, which means lots of stone and resigned acceptance. The thatch roof is a loss, but the stone walls contain the damage. Within an hour, that feels like a lifetime. The flames are reduced to sullen smoke, and everyone's standing around looking like chimney sweeps who've had a particularly bad day. How did it start? Lord William demands, and suddenly everyone finds the ground fascinating. The guilty party is obvious: a stable boy no older than 14 who looks like he's considering whether burning at the stake would be worse than Lord William's displeasure. I was checking on the mare, my lord, the boy stammers. She's due to foal, and I thought, I had a small light. A small light. Lord William's voice could freeze the Thames. And where is this small light now? The boy points helplessly at the smoldering stable. Medieval justice is swift. The boy is sentenced to rebuild the damaged section, pay a fine he clearly can't afford, and undergo a public humiliation that will involve the stocks and probably some rotten vegetables. But he keeps his hands, which is lenient by medieval standards. The crisis passed, new problems emerge. Where do the horses go? Who stands guard against opportunistic thieves who might see the chaos as shopping opportunity? Why does Sir Marcus claim his missing saddle was definitely in the stable and worth 3 times its actual value? Witchcraft, old Margaret declares, because of course she does. Saw a black cat near the stable yesterday, sure sign of devilry. This starts a heated debate about whether the fire was natural, the boy, supernatural, witches, or divine punishment for unspecified sins that everyone apparently has theories about. You're assigned to help move the displaced horses to temporary quarters, which means the Great Hall is about to smell even worse than usual. Horses, it turns out, have opinions about architectural changes and express them through strategic defecation. You spend the next hour dodging hooves, and worse while trying to convince Tempest that the hall is perfectly acceptable accommodation. Could have been worse, Edmund chirps, because he's physically incapable of not finding silver linings. Remember the fire of 38, or was it 39? Anyway, took half the castle and Lord William's eyebrows. They grew back mostly. The aftermath involves everyone standing around critiquing the firefighting effort. Should have formed two lines. Should have used more sand. Should have noticed the smoke sooner. Should have, should have, should have. Medieval people love post crisis analysis almost as much as they love the actual crisis. Dawn is breaking by the time some semblance of order returns. You're soot stained, exhausted, and smell like a chimney that's achieved sentience. But the horses are safe, the fire's out, and only one building is partially destroyed, which counts as a win in medieval emergency management. Well, Lord William announces, surveying his smoke-stained domain, the hunt is postponed. We'll need to rebuild, reorganize, and find out if anyone else is hiding small lights where they shouldn't be. A collective groan goes up. Postponing the hunt means another day of regular castle life, which somehow seems worse than facing wild boars. But there's also relief. At least you won't have to pretend to be competent at medieval hunting while operating on no sleep and smelling like a barbecue. Right then, Edmund says, appearing with a bucket of what he optimistically calls wash water, but looks like someone's dissolved charcoal in mud. Let's get you cleaned up, sir. Can't have you smelling like a bacon mishap all day. What would the ladies think? You don't point out that everyone currently smells like various stages of combustion. Medieval crisis, where everyone pretends things are normal while covered in soot and existential dread. The castle slowly returns to its version of normal. Guards return to posts. Servants begin the endless cleaning, and someone starts the rumor that the fire was actually started by French spies, which is more exciting than a careless stable boy, and therefore will be the official story by noon. As the chaos of the night finally settles and exhaustion weighs on your soot-covered limbs, you stumble back toward your chamber for what remains of the night. The castle has that peculiar post-crisis quiet, where everyone's too tired to maintain their usual noise levels. Even the roosters seem to have agreed to sleep in after the night's excitement. Your straw mattress, despite its many faults, looks like a cloud of paradise compared to standing upright for another moment. Edmund helps you out of your smoke-saturated clothes with less chatter than usual. Even he has limits, apparently. Just rest, sir, he says softly. I'll wake you whenever they decide we need to be awake. It's the most sensible thing anyone's said all day. You collapse onto the bed, not caring about prayers, salt circles, or the proper arrangement of protective talismans. The straw pokes through in all the familiar places. The blanket scratches like medieval pennants, but none of it matters. Your eyes close, and for once, the castle's night sounds, dripping water, settling stones, scurrying rats, become a lullaby of sorts. In your dreams, you're not in medieval England anymore. You're back in your time, standing in a modern bedroom with its miraculous mattress that doesn't require an exorcist. The shower runs with hot water that doesn't need to be carried up the 3 flights of stairs. There's a refrigerator humming softly in the kitchen, full of food that won't give you dysentery. Electric lights banish shadows without risk of burning down the building. It's paradise, or rather, it's Tuesday. The dream shifts, showing you coffee makers and washing machines, toilets that flush, and rooms that stay warm without requiring someone to die gathering firewood. You see yourself complaining about Wi Fi speeds and traffic jams, blissfully unaware that these are luxury problems compared to arguing whether your neighbor's pig has devil granted intelligence or is just unusually clever. But even in the dream, something pulls you back. The bell for matins rings faintly, barely penetrating your exhaustion, then lauds passes unnoticed. By the time prime rolls around, the castle is stirring again, but slower than usual. Firefighting, apparently, is a valid excuse for sleeping in by medieval standards. When you finally wake properly, it's to sunlight streaming through your now unstuffed window and Edmund's gentle prodding. Sir Thomas, the day's half gone, but Lord William says everyone can rest after last night's trials. Half gone means it's probably all of 7 in the morning, but medieval time is relative. You lie there for a moment, caught between the dream of your modern life and the reality of medieval England. The contrast is sharp enough to cut. Here, where a small fire is a catastrophe and not dying of various diseases is considered good luck, versus there, where people complain about their phone battery dying and consider it a crisis. I had the strangest dream. You tell Edmund as he helps you into fresh clothes. Well, fresh by medieval standards. They've only been worn twice this week. About a land where water comes from walls and light comes from glass bulbs. Sounds like sorcery, sir, Edmund says cheerfully. Best not mention it to Father Benedict. He's still suspicious about that merchant who claimed to have beans that make water brown and keep you awake, called it devil's brew, and had the beans burned. You almost laugh, then realize with a pang that Edmund just described coffee, poor medieval England, struggling along without caffeine, antibiotics, or the basic understanding that maybe covering your sewage might be a good idea. The day continues in its medieval way. The stable gets rebuilt with impressive speed because medieval people are nothing if not practical about regular disasters. Your various bruises from combat practice throb in harmony with your smoke-irritated throat. The great hall still smells faintly of horse, despite vigorous scrubbing with substances that probably violate several future environmental laws. But there's something almost peaceful about it, too. The simplicity of knowing exactly where you stand, 7 spots from the salt. What's expected of you? Don't die, pay your taxes, avoid witchcraft. And what tomorrow will bring, more of the same, possibly with different livestock-related crises. As the day wears on, you find yourself adapting to the rhythm of medieval life. The terrible food becomes just food. The uncomfortable clothes become just clothes. The constant threat of death from various sources becomes background noise, like traffic in a modern city. You're becoming medieval, and that's either adaptation or Stockholm syndrome. Evening approaches with its familiar routines. Vespers rings, and you file into the chapel with everyone else, mumbling along to Latin you still don't understand, but now find oddly comforting. Supper is the usual adventure in questionable nutrition. The entertainment is a juggler who only drops things twice, which is considered a rousing success. As you prepare for bed again, salt circle, prayers, the whole protective rigmarole, you realize you've survived not just a day, but a full cycle of medieval life. You've dispensed justice badly, fought in training worse, attended religious services confusedly, survived a fire barely, and managed not to die of dysentery, plague, or sheer culture shock. Edmund chatters as he helps you prepare for bed, talking about tomorrow's plans. The postponed hunt will happen eventually. There's market day coming up, and someone's definitely going to challenge someone else to single combat over that cheese dispute from yesterday. It's almost endearing how these people face each day with the cheerful fatalism of those who know life is short, brutal, and often ridiculous. Sleep well, sir, Edmund says, heading for the door. Tomorrow's a new day full of new adventures. New ways to die, you mean, you mutter, but there's affection in it. That too, sir, but think positive. You might discover new ways to live as well. As he closes the door, you settle into your scratchy blanket on your murderous mattress in your damp chamber in a castle that's one carelessly placed candle from burning down. The guard calls, all's well, though you know it really isn't. Somewhere, a sheep bleats mournfully, a rat scurries in the walls. The castle settles with sounds that suggest the stones are having second thoughts about staying stacked. But you're adapting, you're surviving, you're becoming medieval one uncomfortable day at a time. And as sleep takes you, you dream not of your modern life, but of tomorrow's hunt, where you'll probably fall off Tempest and into a bog, but at least you'll do it with the proper medieval spirit, resigned acceptance mixed with dark humor and the faint hope that the bog isn't too deep. The candle flickers its familiar shadows. Your sword gleams within reach. The prayer bundle around your neck promises protection from supernatural threats, if not from natural ones. And you drift off to sleep in medieval England, where you've learned the most important lesson of all. When everything is trying to kill you, you might as well get a good night's rest first. After all, tomorrow the French might invade, the plague might arrive, or Sir Roland might finally perfect his Welsh accent. But tonight, in your salty circle with your scratchy blanket and your straw mattress that's developed character, you're as safe as anyone in 1347 can be. Which isn't very safe at all, but it's enough. You close your eyes, and medieval England fades into dreams where knights snore, horses have opinions, and somewhere in the distance, a guard calls eternally that all's well, even when it definitely isn't. And you sleep the sleep of someone who's learned that survival isn't about the comforts you have, but the disasters you've dodged. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. It always does in medieval England. But tonight, you rest. The wind whistles through gaps in the stone, carrying the scent of wood smoke and adventure. Your breathing slows, matching the ancient rhythm of the castle. And in this moment, suspended between one medieval day and the next, you're exactly where you're supposed to be, even if where you're supposed to be is on a flea-infested mattress in a damp castle in an age where cheese can be legally contested. All's well.